Welcome once again to Hot Reads, Week 7 of the NFL season. With the questions, I'm Tom Vandervoort, and with the answers, Hall of Fame quarterback Troy Aikman. And Troy, you go to Minneapolis this week, the last undefeated team in the NFL, the Green Bay Packers. I think you might be seeing them for the second time, but Christian Ponder is going to see them for the first time. That is some tough duty for a rookie quarterback. What advice can you give to Christian Ponder?
Well, duck probably. It's the good thing is he's playing at home. Clearly he's going to get a lot of different looks from Dom Capers. Their teams have had some success against the Packers this year in terms of moving the ball, but this is going to be a challenge. You go through the preseason and you think you've got some things relatively figured out, and then you get into the regular season and it's dramatically different, for that rookie player. But I think the important thing for Christian Ponder is to not think so much about being 1-5, or if they get behind, trying to do too much. That, my advice to him would be, just go and play and execute the offense, and don't let circumstances of the game, really dictate what it is that he's trying to do. Because, if you get behind in a game like this, which is certainly possible against the Green Bay Packers, then as a young quarterback, you start trying to make throws that you don't necessarily need to try to make because you're trying to get the team back from behind. It just compounds problems, and it's going to probably be a tough day for him. Combine that with the fact that there's a couple offensive linemen starters that may not be playing, and hey, it's a learning experience, and all of us have gone through it.
Do you, for a young quarterback like this, does a coach simplify the game plan for him, or do you just have to kind of give him the full meal?
A lot of times they try to scale back a little bit, not because he can't handle it intellectually. I mean, this is a guy who got his degree in 2.5 years. He got his MBA, and he was working on his second master's at the time that he got drafted, by the Minnesota Vikings. So obviously a smart guy. He's going to know the playbook. But the biggest problem is he hasn't gotten the number of reps that a guy like Donovan McNabb had, not only this season, but certainly the experience factor. So you go into a game, you ask him what he's comfortable doing, and you try to maybe scale back a little bit so that he's confident on each and every play and where he's going to go with the football. And I think that gives him a much better chance then to have some success.
Now, another quarterback in the news this week, obviously Carson Palmer, certainly the biggest trade deadline deal. At least one first-round pick, possibly 2 first-round picks for this guy. He hasn't played in at least, 9 months. Got to learn a new system. Can you evaluate this trade? It seems just at first glance that was a pretty high price to pay for Carson Palmer.
Yeah, it was. It was a lot to give up. You're talking about at least a first and a second, and as you said, Tom, potentially, and I think a real good chance it could be 2 ones. And so that's a lot. It's a lot for any player. Certainly that is something you'd give up for a quarterback, but for a player who's 31 years old and will be 32, and so it's a steep price. I think it was a great deal for Cincinnati. Very similar to what we did in Dallas when we traded Herschel Walker, and I hope it works out for him in Oakland.
Now, obviously, when you go to a new team, we always talk about learning a new system. Al Saunders runs that system out there, the offensive coordinator. But I wonder also, as a quarterback, how much of getting to a new team is learning the actual players that you're playing with, whether it be the linemen or the receivers and their tendencies and the way they like to do things?
Yeah, I think the biggest part of it for Carson, because he does know the offense. It's a 3-digit system, very similar to what I ran in Dallas. Carson ran that same system in Cincinnati, and now he'll be able to step in and know what they're doing. There'll still be a bit of a learning curve, but not as dramatic as maybe what some people might think. I think the bigger point is what you mentioned, Tom, because there are some receivers who are just real quarterback friendly. We had guys who would come into Dallas, and within 2 weeks, you just had a good feel for how they were going to run their routes, the body language at the top of the route, let you know when to turn the ball loose. And there are some receivers, quite frankly, that would be around for a couple of years and you never quite got a feel for what they were doing, because every time they ran a route, it was a little bit different. And, I can't speak to how that's going to manifest itself there in Oakland, but, how quickly Carson can develop some type of chemistry with those players is ultimately going to dictate his success, not getting in there and getting caught up on the playbook.
Interesting. Now, one of the signature moments from last week, obviously, the 49ers and the Lions playing each other at the end of the game. We saw the emotional side of Jim Harbaugh. We know he coached at Stanford, a college coach coming to the pros. I know when you played for Jimmy Johnson, it was a similar situation. I don't know about Jimmy's style, but certainly Jim Harbaugh is an emotional guy. And yet we all know pro football, and we saw it this offseason, is a business. And I wonder, in the professional football ranks, can that emotional style work, and how well can it work?
It's an interesting question, because when Jimmy Johnson came to Dallas in '89, he was one of these rah-rah type of coaches who wanted to be positive. And so he approached it the same way that he had when he was in college, and it was very successful. And I think that then people started viewing it a little bit differently. And so, as it relates to Jim Harbaugh, he's been an excellent coach at every stop, at San Diego, and then certainly what he was able to accomplish at Stanford. And now, in the early going there in San Francisco, I like the enthusiasm that he shows. It's clear that his team is fed off of that. But in addition to just having enthusiasm, what he brings, I believe, is an air of confidence that permeates through the rest of that team. And so even though we spend a lot of time talking about last week and the handshake, and really there is no place for that in the game, we are teaching our young kids about sportsmanship. That needs to be exhibited at the highest level, certainly, by the professionals in the NFL. But having said that, I think that it was another step in letting his team know that, hey, we're not the 49ers that are just going to get run over by people. We're going to stand up to ourselves, and we're going to be tough-minded. And it's worked for that team. And I think it will continue to work for Jim Harbaugh. I think there's some guys that are just born to coach, and I think Jim's one of those guys.
Absolutely. All right, Troy, thanks again, man. Appreciate it. We'll catch up with you next week.
You got it.